Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Medical Myths, the show about what not to do with your body. And today I have a special guest, and we have been on streams together before. And if any of you in my audience don't know who this is, like, I don't know where you've been.
Yeah, how can you not know me? I'm like so super famous.
I mean, you kind of are. But I mean, first of all, I have to introduce Arden not only as an amazing person in the community, but also as the person
Aw.
who drew my little channel art,
Yeah, your little student doctor.
which
Oh,
we'll have to update that when I graduate.
true. Yeah, full doc, full doc.
But anyway, would you like to introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm Arden Hart. I do a show on the Lion Network here on YouTube where we talk about trans issues, the call-in show. And I also do other stuff across the internet, but I don't want to get Ben in trouble. So why don't you just follow me on Twitter and you'll find all of that info there.
Yep, some over 18 type content. So just be aware. So today's topic is one that I mean we've been on kind of a little mental health kick recently. We had a show on ADHD, and we've had other shows where we brought up mental health because I think mental health is one that is very easy for people to bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a new field where we're really starting to learn more about the human brain and how we interact with the world, and especially now that the stigma is starting to go away with mental health treatment. People in the woo side of things have found ways to scam people even more. And so I was on the internet, as always, looking for content to debunk. And I knew Arden likes to talk psychology. So I was like, what can I find? And so I Googled psychiatric naturopathy, and I found a lot of cringe.
A lot of
Um,
cringe.
anything you want to say before I pull this up? Anything that the audience should be looking forward to with this?
Uh, there's no, I think it's better to just expose them. Just fucking throw them into the deep end, all right?
Okay.
They'll handle
Okay.
it.
Okay. So I found this is the first page that I found of this Amen or Amen Clinics, however she pronounces his name, and he talks about psychiatric naturopathy and how it can help your mental health. And right away, we get into this with the things that we see in every single woo video that we've come across. This idea that you don't want medications to be your only treatment option. Have you already tried conventional treatment without relief from your symptoms? Are you hesitant to see a psychiatrist because you're interested in a more holistic approach to treatment for mental health issues? There's a solution, and it's called psychiatric naturopathy. So, what is this? Well, he's not going to be very specific.
What? No.
So he says naturopathic psychiatry takes a holistic mind, body, spirit approach to mental health and well-being that aims to educate the patient, prevent mental illness, and provide natural solutions. This in contrast to allopathic psychiatry, also known as conventional or traditional psychiatry, which typically looks to use medications to mask symptoms. It's important to note that naturopathic doctors, NDs, who specialize in psychiatry are trained in conventional medicine as well as being educated in complementary medicine. They rely on science, and the therapies they recommend are backed by rigorous research. And the first thing right off the bat, no, they are not trained in conventional medicine. They are not trained in the same science, and they are not backed by research. Also, this guy is not an ND, he's an MD. So I don't know why he's
I
going with
mean,
this.
you can be intelligent and still out to make a quick buck, I suppose.
Absolutely. And we're not going to go too much into this whole nonsense because this is a whole slew of things for later videos. But right off the bat, he's talking about looking for the root causes. And we see this every time. People are saying that doctors just want to mask your symptoms and they don't want to get to the root cause.
The root cause, yeah.
And he starts bringing up some very well-known pseudoscience, such as adrenal fatigue. He talks about toxins. He talks about inflammation, hormonal imbalances, infections, head trauma. I mean, some of those things, yeah, sure, they have crossover with
Mhm.
psychiatry. But some of these are things that we know to be debunked. And kind of what are your thoughts on some of these?
I mean, I feel like kind of similar to how like the root cause is something that you see all over like naturopathy. Inflammation is another one that I feel like comes up all of the time, and it's usually very non-specific. Like inflammation of what? The brain, like specific region of the brains, like to what degree? Like there's it's just these general like issues that sound bad. Like if something's inflamed, it sounds like your brain is like swelling to the point where it could like burst out the top of your skull, you know? And that's like probably not actually what's going on.
Oh
Um
no. The funny thing is like they'll take something that's a more benign condition or something that's not severe, and they'll say, yeah, well, you can have inflammation of the brain. And they'll say, okay, well, yeah, if you get inflammation of your brain, you can have these symptoms. I mean, yes,
mhm.
you can get some of these symptoms, but this is something we call encephalopathy, and this is fatal. And you get a whole slew of other symptoms associated. Like, if you have encephalopathy, you probably know about it.
Yeah, yeah. What I think what they wanna do is stoke the fear of like a low grade inflammation that it maybe isn't as dire, but it's still impacting every little nook and cranny of your life that's going wrong, so that you're looking for a solution to that. I think exposure to toxins is similar. It's in the same vein, right? Like there's definitely like historical examples of where like lead paint, for example, in walls where like those could be a genuine problem, or like Teflon in the blood, that's like a genuine problem. But usually when we're talking about toxins in this context, it's they don't specify what toxins or to like what levels are dangerous, where we're being exposed to them, exactly how they're impacting us. It's supposed to be this just general sense of this like bad energy in your brain.
And in fact, this is something that isn't currently on this website, but because he took it down. But he
Oh,
used
really?
to talk about
Yeah.
the soul and how this
Yeah.
stuff is going to affect like your soul,
Mhm. Mhm.
which
I
I mean, he has a lot of red flags.
Yeah, I mean, I think in one of the, videos that the Amen Clinic has on their YouTube channel, they talk about, like, the 4 pillars of their treatment plan, one of them being a spiritual one. So, definitely, there's very much a metaphysical aspect to this entire, like, treatment modality, I'll say.
Yeah, so let's get into the fun part of this
Mhm.
whole treatment plan. So he looking further into this website, because at first I was like, okay, sure, we're getting the same things that we see over and over again with these people. And something that he does that I've mentioned in previous medical myths episodes is that some of the most dangerous people are the ones that know what they're doing and can take real bits of truth and then twist them into some significance that isn't there. And he's really good at this. And
Yeah.
this is why I wanted to do an episode on this, especially with somebody like Arden, because it's very easy for anyone who doesn't study the brain to say, yeah, this makes sense. I could see why this would be helpful. But the techniques that he uses, like, and he's very well spoken. He's
Mhm.
charismatic, and he does a good job at selling his stuff. But it's not honest.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and I went through a couple of his, like, publications too. He's got a lot of publications on research of, like, "Oh, this disorder might have a correlation with activities in regions XYZ of the brain." So he definitely has enough education to be able to wield this information and, as we'll get into soon, these, like, very dubious brain scans, in a way that is clearly meant to, make people be afraid of, like, what's wrong with their brain and to make them potentially buy into overpriced, non-evidence-based treatments.
Yeah. So it sounds like you show up to this office. You have some mental health thing going on. Like, let's say that you're not focusing super well at work. Okay, cool. So I want to go see a professional for this. So I go to this clinic, and it seems kind of like anything else, like any other psychotherapist that I might go to. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to somebody, and they're going to ask me some questions about, the biological, psychosocial, social, and spiritual aspects of my life, which, I mean, sure, you're probably going to talk about some spiritual components of your life if that's something meaningful to you with a psychologist. Um, but I mean, this part doesn't really sound out of the ordinary. But then after that, you get a brain scan. So he says, unlike traditional psychiatry that rarely looks at the organ it treats, we use brain SPECT imaging, which measures blood flow and activity in the brain to help us more accurately diagnose and treat all your needs. A full evaluation includes 2 brain SPECT imaging studies. One study is done while at rest, and the second after a concentration task is given. A highly trained scan technologist will guide you through the entire process and ensure you're comfortable at all times. So here's the machine. It kind of looks like a CT scan, but it's a triangle and not a circle. It's not a donut.
Yes. Yep.
What are your thoughts so far?
I mean, we talked about this a little in the pre-show. Like, there can be like interesting information that you glean from like a SPECT scan, right? Like SPECT imaging. Like we talked about earlier, you can understand like, oh, people who have like PTSD overwhelmingly have like lower activity in these regions of the brain. And I'm sure there might be an interesting reason why, and that could lead us to some like useful discoveries down the road. But when we're talking about using this as a diagnostic tool for psychological issues, that's where we start to get into this not doing what it seems to purport to do. Like this blurb is clearly
Mhm.
trying to suggest that by having a brain scan, you could identify potential issues with the functioning of your brain, like physically, and that they can then derive a treatment plan from that. When, as far as I've done my research, that doesn't seem to be accurate. That such a tool would give you that kind of information.
And of course, of course, he's going to just come out and shit on conventional psychiatry.
Right.
And I mean, one of the easiest ways to get people on your side is to tell them that everyone else is lying to you.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the idea that you have to like physically look at an organ to be able to diagnose it, like, sure, okay, if we're talking neurology, you can do a neurological exam and figure out what parts are not working, but
Mhm.
the psyche is a bit different. Like, you don't have, I mean, sure, if you wanted to look at individual neurons and see which individual neurons are doing things in certain parts of the brain, sure. Okay, that sounds like it's very invasive and probably not worth your time. But like the methods used in psychiatry and in clinical psychology, like you diagnose through the interview. Like the interview is your exam.
Yep.
And like the questions that are asked are intentional. It's not just talking to make you feel good, even though you might feel good in sharing some things, but the reasons they ask you certain questions about your life at home and your energy levels and like certain coping mechanisms you might have for things in your life, like these are intentional questions, and they tell different things that can tell us if you're having like ADHD or depression or anxiety.
Mhm. Yeah, like if you're going to go to a like psychologist or a counselor or whatever, and they make you take like the MMPI, for example, like there are like the results that you'd get from that have like predictive viability. Like we can go, oh, based on these results, these sort of treatments are going to be most likely to be like efficacious for you. But when we're talking about like these brain scans, it doesn't seem to be the case that we can derive that level of predictive power for treatment from from the information you'd get. Um, which is, yeah,
Yeah.
clearly the implication.
So it's just funny that he says that you need to look at the organ.
Yeah.
But what is looking at a brain gonna tell me about someone's like, and a lot of what psychology and psychiatry comes down to is helping people adapt to scenarios in their life, being able to, you know, just, I don't know, go about their lives as a as a regular human. It's not anything like we're trying to funnel you into a diagnosis. That's not the goal,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, and there definitely, like, it can be times where, like, as, like, the diagnostic load of a term, like, kind of expands with, like, culture creep and things that, like, people might get overdiagnosed or but there's also the case that a lot of diagnoses are, like, underdiagnosed, and when we know that these medications are, like, effective, more effective than a placebo or from, like, trials,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, to suggest that, like, all psychiatry is bad and, medication is bad, and what we should really be doing is looking at your brain because there's probably some, like, physical malfunction going on. It just doesn't seem to actually, like, do anything for people. Whereas, like, these
Mm.
medications and, like, evidence-based talk therapy, like CBT, DBT, ACT, these are the things that we know actually have an impact on helping people live with, various different diagnoses.
And when these people try to say that we're trying to put people on medications, that's not usually the case. Like if we have somebody who's not having an emergency, like the gold standard treatment is usually some type of therapy. Like
Right.
we don't jump straight to a medication if that's not indicated. Usually
Yeah.
we'll try therapy, and then if therapy does not work by itself, then we add a medication with the therapy. Rarely ever will we stop the therapy. That's usually the best thing to do.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we're not trying to just use medications. And so they then do like a assessment with these questions. Are you familiar with Total Brain?
Yeah, I actually went to their website and I took like the initial free questionnaire, which I don't know if that's I don't think that's the same one that they use for like their
Mm.
detailed clinical assessment. Maybe a like an abridged version or something. Um, I think I haven't read any like articles on like any. I don't know if you have, if there is any evidence that it's like actually efficacious and has any predictive power. It kind of seemed to me on an initial first glance like a glorified personality test. Not so much like asking about like symptoms and coping mechanisms or anything like that. So yeah, that was my like initial reaction to it. I'll say.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with it. I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking into this because, like you said, I'm sure it's very similar to other personality tests that you find.
Mm.
And just knowing his tactics. So I mean, yeah, and then you meet with the doctor, and then they talk about what they're gonna do. So
I
I'm
love
gonna
those
talk.
brain pictures too in the images that are like
Yeah.
these like
Oh yeah.
psychedelic pink and like purples, which
Hmm.
like are not
Hmm.
actually how like a SPECT image would like look when you're actually getting information from it. So that's just funny.
Yeah. So I want to get into the nitty gritty of the SPECT imaging because there's a lot I want to say, but I'm like waiting for the right moment to say it because I have
Sure,
so
sure.
much. So they say that your brain is involved in everything you do. How you think, how you act, how well you get along with other people is related to moment by moment functioning of your brain. You're not wrong there. You're
Mhm.
not wrong. When
Right.
the brain works right, people tend to work right. True. Good job. When the brain is troubled, people tend to struggle to be their best selves. I mean, yeah, if you're in a coma, you're not really your best self. That's true.
Right. Yeah, if you're struggling with brain lesions, yeah, like you might it might not have the highest degree of functionality for sure.
Unfortunately, psychiatry remains the only medical field that rarely looks at the organ it treats. How can you know what's going on inside your head if nobody ever looks? Experienced psychiatrists can tell if someone is likely to have ADHD, OCD, or bipolar disorder without the benefit of these tools, but without functional brain imaging tools, clinicians will never be able to know the underlying brain patterns of the patients they treat,
Mm.
so they are handicapped to throw medicated tip darts in the dark at their patients. Like I said, that's not That's not the, and this guy is I'm pretty sure he's still board certified, a board certified psychiatrist.
Yeah, I think that's such a misrepresentation of like what actual psychiatry does. I mean, like we talked about, there are a number of different measures and tools and surveys that you can take that are like actually evidence-based, that have predictive power for like the efficacy of treatment. Uh, it, I think that's kind of like what you said earlier. It's just clearly an attempt to foster a distrust in like traditional psychiatry so that people are more inclined to maybe take a risk on something that isn't as evidence-based.
Hmm. So let's learn about what this scan is. Brain SPECT, single photon emission computed tomography, is the state of the art brain mapping tool that can give psychiatrists more information to help their patients more effectively. SPECT is a nuclear medicine study that is proven to reliably evaluate blood flow and activity in the brain. SPECT allows physicians to look deep inside the brain to observe three things: one, areas of the brain that work well; two, areas of the brain that work too hard; and three, areas of the brain that do not work hard enough. So it's looking at blood flow and activity. And apparently it's proven. He doesn't even post a lot of actual studies. So one thing that is true about this, it has been shown to show associations
Mhm.
between certain brain regions that are working in a certain way and certain conditions, but this is for research purposes. It's used in research and has been helpful for the field of psychology to learn more about what the brain does and try to discover more about those associations. But it has not been demonstrated to show any significance clinically. And I think it's important to acknowledge that research and efficacy in research is not the same as being a good diagnostic tool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, uh, like SPECT imaging has been used to help people. Like I just made like a joke about brain lesions, but like for people who have brain lesions and might struggle with like the various things that come out from that, like aphasia or whatever, like those things, like SPECT can be really useful to learn about like how the brain like remaps following like traumatic injuries and things like that. There's so much really cool stuff we can learn from this tool. But yeah, exactly. It's as a diagnostic tool, like for psychological issues, there are like no like yeah, anyway, sorry. Well, I don't want to like
Oh no,
throw out
no, you can
the whole
talk. Yeah.
thing. I just like yeah, it doesn't seem to be that there are any actual like reliable biomarkers that can be derived from these sorts of images that would be applicable in clinical treatment.
So, and something with the brain and with psychology, a lot of what we know about certain mental illnesses, we know about receptor activity, and we know about neurotransmitters that are involved. So, taking that into consideration, studying blood flow and activity does not tell me anything about receptor activity. It doesn't tell me anything about neurotransmitters. So even if I had some difference in blood flow, if someone had an issue with their serotonin receptor function, I could not tell anything about that receptor function. I couldn't tell anything about their neurotransmitter levels. So a lot of the mechanism of these conditions are not being addressed. And it shows that they're lumping all of these conditions into a mechanism of perfusion or activity. And sure, you can get variations in what you'd see, but the mechanism isn't being addressed. And for people who say that they are trying to get to the root cause, they're not. They're not
Yeah.
even doing that.
Right. Yeah, they're kind of getting nowhere near it. I think it'll get worse too as we maybe get into more of like how this information is used. I watched a
Mhm.
brief interview of some people who got their brain scans done at the Almond Clinic, and uh, it was a little disheartening, honestly. They were kind of led to believe that maybe they had some issues, but like they weren't too serious. And then they came back from the brain scan with the notion that they have like a hole in activity in a certain region of their brain, which seemed to cause them like almost more distress, you know? Yeah, so
Right, and
it's a little
this
concerning.
and this idea that people are more willing to accept a bad answer versus someone saying that they don't know.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
psychology is a relatively new field of study. There are a lot of questions we don't know the answers to, and we can make guesses about what is going on in someone's brain, and we're not going to be 100% accurate all the time. But a lot of times people are more willing to listen to somebody like this who's positing something very out there, but it's an answer. So they feel better because they have an answer when
Yeah.
someone else might be honest and say, "Hey, I don't know if this medication's the right one for you, but we can try it." And then people get discouraged being switched on different medications because all of our brain chemistry is slightly different. There's a lot of nuance to it, and that's why psychology and psychiatry are so hard to be good at, because you just don't know. You have to try things and then switch it around, and people don't like that. People would rather have a brain scan.
Yeah. I mean, I think I understand where that comes from, like, the discomfort with, like, why am I like this? Like, why am I depressed in the first place? Why does my brain have to be like this in the first place? Um, but unfortunately, as it stands right now, we might not necessarily have those answers, but we do know how to help people who are in that situation. I think that's the important thing. Whereas this doesn't have the answers on how to help you, but purports to solve a question that's kind of irrelevant, which is like the
Mhm,
why am I like this in the first place? Like, sure, it might be comforting to know that. Maybe you'll get some sort of inner peace, but like you're not going to actually solve the issue, or like treat those. I know they like to shit on treating symptoms in naturopathy, but that's unfortunately most of what disorders are composed of is clusters of symptoms. So it
mhm.
seems more important to treat that. But anyway,
Yeah, so since the 1970s, brain SPECT has been used to evaluate strokes, seizures, and brain tumors. In the 1980s, scientists were also using it to study Alzheimer's disease, head trauma, schizophrenia, depression, ADHD, and substance abuse. Today, physicians around the world typically order brain SPECT scans to look at the following conditions: Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, seizures, strokes, head trauma, chemical exposure, Lyme disease, brain inflammation, and drug toxicity. And let me so he's intentionally using certain conditions to say, hey, yeah, people use these scans for that. But something that's important to notice, the conditions that he is listing are conditions that can be related to blood flow. Like these are physical illnesses of the brain. Alzheimer's disease is associated with plaques. You have strokes, obviously, you have ischemia. So, sure, if you were to study blood flow in someone whose brain is ischemic, you're not going to see some blood flow, and that could be useful.
mhm.
Granted, this is not going to be the first scan that we go to. We're going to go to a non-contrast CT first because we want to rule out hemorrhage. But all of these that he is mentioning that it has uses for are physical conditions related to blood flow.
Right. Yep.
So, any other thoughts on on that?
Uh, no, not particularly. I think you've covered it. I mean, and that's the entirety of working with this guy is that he will jump back and forth between like factual and irrelevant information and like claims that he can't demonstrate. And I think it's kind of meant to be super confusing and sort of poison the well for people who aren't educated on any of this stuff. So
And I'm real clear. I'm not saying that mental illness isn't physical. I'm saying it's not easily physically demonstrated on a brain scan.
yeah.
Um, and something. Oh, I was gonna go somewhere with with the dementia thing. One of the most common causes of dementia, especially in the United States, is vascular dementia, which is an ischemic issue. So there you go. So the research on brain SPECT is vast, with over 14,000 scientific research articles on it listed on PubMed.com. At Almond Clinics, we've studied and used SPECT to help us with complex psychiatric patients and have published 70 peer-reviewed scientific studies on SPECT. In 2012, we published a study in which we asked seven N
Yeah.
equals 7, to evaluate 109 consecutive charts without brain spec scans and then with scans. And 8 times out of 10, adding the scan to the review changed the diagnosis and or treatment. In over 1 in 5 cases, the scan revealed an unexpected brain injury, and in another 1 in 5 cases, it revealed an unexpected toxicity. Very vague toxicity, and 60% of the time it changed the medications or supplements recommended. What toxicity?
Yeah. I mean, that is the issue that I find with this guy a lot, is you'll hear this a lot. Like, there's an issue in their brain, there's toxicity in their brain, they don't have brain reserve is something he'll talk about. These terms that are so devoid of information that it's just meant to think you there's like this mysterious miasma that's like affecting these people that this magical technology can somehow help with.
And something with this, do you think that potentially there, and I'm not saying that there was, because he doesn't post the study, so I don't know the study design. But the fact, if you added the scan into the review and you had a scan that said something is abnormal, what's the potential for bias?
I mean, definitely there's plenty of potential there. And and also I think it's you mentioned that, like, there are so few psychiatrists in this study and few cases that they're evaluating that it's really hard to derive any like broad term information from it, even if this information is being conveyed like honestly and accurately, and we just don't have like maybe all the details of what toxicity. There's definitely potential for bias, and there's potential that this data, even if the data is good, that it's not able to be generalized to to broader society or broader treatment plans.
Yeah, like I know in examples of EKGs, like if you use a monitor, a lot of times the EKG will write an interpretation on it, and I never look at that because it's usually wrong, and you run into risk of misdiagnosis because if that phrase is wrong, but you look at it, you're primed then to be looking in the EKG for that pattern instead of analyzing it just straight the way it is and then seeing what you find from it. It's going to skew your interpretation. And so if you added the scan before you made your assessment and your plan, that could be very problematic because now you're looking for a pattern based on what you saw there, when it's probably not even indicative of what's happening.
Yeah.
And so here we get into the scans. So this sounds great, right? This sounds like I can get some imaging, tell me exactly what my problems are. So they say that there are 2 types of SPECT scans. There's a surface scan and an active scan. And a healthy surface scan, looking down from the top, shows full, even symmetrical activity. The color is not important. It's the shape that matters. Surface scans can help us see the areas that are healthy and those with low activity. Healthy active scan shows the most active parts of the brain. Here, blue is average activity, and red, or sometimes red and white, are the most active parts of the brain. In a healthy scan, the most active area is in the cerebellum, at the back bottom part of the brain, which makes up just 10% of the brain's volume, but houses half the brain's neurons. Okay, so we have scans. We can look at these ones first. So here's a healthy one. And then here's our active scans.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it looks like we've got things.
It's definitely a brain scan.
It's a brain. Great.
Brain.
And then he talks about fMRI, which we actually did have someone in the comments talking about how fMRI would probably be more effective, and you're right there. There are a couple things that I wanted to address. Oh, these are just videos. I don't care about your videos, dude. Here's his research Oh, he just does research. Where's this? Here's the case studies. Love these. All the stock photos.
Mm.
So here's a Ring of Fire ADD, which is funny because he claims that there are 7 types of ADD, whereas I think most credible organizations say that there are 3.
Mm.
But he says Tanya, a 17-year-old female, was brought for evaluation because of severe temper problems, conduct problems, and a 5-year history of alcohol abuse that has escalated in the prior 2 years, and depression with suicidal ideation. Her parents felt her behavior was willful and she could change if she wanted to change. Ew. Initially, they were opposed to psychiatric treatment, but reluctantly came after she had a suicide attempt. Holy shit. Her scan revealed marked hyperactivity throughout in the cortex and a ring of fire pattern, along with marked increased left basal ganglia activity. She had a nice response to Neurontin and Prozac, obtaining more level moods, less temper outbursts, and more cooperative behavior. This is not a case report. This is like frame this as an anecdote. This is not a case report. I need more info.
Right. And
also,
all this entire this case study demonstrates the absolute irrelevance of these brain scans and treatment, because they had a clear history of her behavior, and then they put her on an evidence-based medication, Prozac, and had success. Like, you could have cut out this brain scan and had the exact same results. And that's what a competent professional would have done in that situation.
Exactly. So this is a great time to talk about what makes a good diagnostic test. So 2 terms that you all know about, and Arden got my whole soapbox behind the scenes, because this is my soapbox on this channel, is sensitivity and specificity, because we care about true positives and true negatives, and we want to rule out false positives and false negatives. Of course, you can't always do that, but he's using a technique here that we see with chiropractors especially do this. And I'm going to make a whole video about chiropractors and this specific technique, where I don't know if any of you have been to a chiropractor that gets x-rays, but many of them are now getting x-rays. And something about this, they will get the x-ray and say, I am just making sure that you don't have any conditions here that are like a problematic and where I need to change my treatment. And x-rays have very, very high sensitivity and very, very low specificity, because most people have some kind of spinal abnormality. So, and they're asymptomatic. So you go to your chiropractor, they get an x-ray, and they say it's out of alignment, which could be you breathed and your spine shifted while you breathed, or something happened, or a lot of people have asymptomatic bulging discs at L4 and L5. So they find this, you're not bothered by it, but they say, oh, there's a problem here. I need to fix this, and you need to pay me to fix this, and I need you to come back over and over again to keep getting treated for this. So it's highly sensitive because it's picking up everybody that could possibly have a condition and then tells them, I can fix this. So it's highly sensitive, but it is not highly specific. So something that is specific is going to rule out people who are negative, who do not have a condition. And it will, so if you ideally want a test that is highly sensitive and highly specific. You want to rule in everybody who has a condition. You want to rule out everybody who does not.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be like these people, you're going to take this scan and you could find anything you wanted wrong with this. And it is up to your interpretation. This is highly, highly sensitive. Pretty much everybody would probably have an abnormality on this scan. Yeah, and then they can say, you need to follow through with this treatment. And also, these scans are $3,000.
Yeah.
Scan.
Yep.
And they want you to get multiples. They want you to come back for repeat scans. And I think the repeat scans are about $700.
Yeah, I think comparing this to chiropractic is such a good example. They have turned the activity of your brain into the alignment of the spine, and that fixing this issue in ways that don't might not necessarily even actually address the specific reason that there was activity in that way at that particular time, will be the solution to the issue. Yeah, I think that was a really apt analogy.
And I think it's important to discuss here, like, what is the harm? What is the harm of if I want to get a scan, and even if it's not helpful, like, it's not doing anything to hurt me, right? But it is. We just said it's about $3,000. Think about somebody
Mhm.
who maybe their kid hasn't been doing well in school because they can't focus. They're not in an environment that's conducive to their learning, and this parent might be a single parent who is trying to make enough income just to support the family, and then now they have to spend $3,000 on a scan that will give them the answer that they are looking for about how to help their kids succeed in school. And they're going to get something like this. This is harmful. And then also this scan is radiation. And there are certain times when it's important that we get the scan, and it's worth the radiation exposure to get the diagnostic information, such as if you're having a stroke. I would rather you get some radiation and have a scan that's negative, and at least be able to have the opportunity to properly diagnose a stroke.
Mhm.
Right? There's times when it's worth it. This is not a time where it is worth the radiation. Like, if I could demonstrate, because I can't even demonstrate with this, that there's a difference between the diagnostic ability of this scan versus a psychiatrist and their interview. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the comparison. Does this do better than the gold standard at diagnosing? But then also think about the psychiatric interview. That's a low risk procedure. Having a talk with a psychiatrist is a low risk procedure. This is radiation exposure. There is risk, and at
Mhm.
no demonstrated benefit to doing it.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you were saying too is the kind of people he preys on are people who are sort of at their wits' end, or like maybe they aren't as like educated on treatment modalities for like psychological issues. Um, he talks often about like his daughter who, was a smart kid, but she wasn't doing successful. And then she got a brain scan and he gave her some like vitamins or something. And all of a sudden she got straight A's again. It kind of, it preys upon this notion of like, oh, I have this issue or I'm not living up to like the expectations for me. Maybe if I go do this thing, even if it's risky, it's just going to be the solution to all my problems. It feels sort of maniacal when we start thinking about it that way, because it's this man is maybe using this information for like research purposes or something. I don't know, and taking these people's money at such a high amounts for what seems to be just an absolutely irrelevant part of the diagnostic process. It's um, really sad that people could be taken advantage of in that way. And I mean, and to be fair, that's an issue across all of naturopathy, right? Like when we're talking about,
Mhm.
diluted, extremely diluted kinds of medicines, alternative medicines, um, and like chiropractic, like people are spending insane amounts of money for what doesn't seem to be like demonstrable benefit. And that's really unfortunate. Like, if you have the money to spend and you wanna do that, I'm not gonna be the person who, like, tells you, you can't do that, but, I think it would not be a wise choice, and it would probably the the false hope that you're going to be given and the, like, actual outcomes that are gonna result from this stuff, that could cause, like, further emotional distress down the line potentially. So, there's far too much potential for harm and no demonstrated benefit.
Right? And think about some of these diagnoses. You have to be very careful about how you diagnose them, and there's certain criteria that you have to meet, and a lot of these are situational criteria, right? Like ADHD, you need to have symptoms across two different settings,
Mhm.
and so kind of the nuances of these conditions and where they apply are not addressed here. Like that's not something that you can't meet diagnostic criteria for any of these with a brain scan.
Yeah, yeah. They're definitely, and like we talked about a million times, like it's in the research, it's really interesting to be like, oh, like this type of brain activity correlates with these sorts of diagnoses, and what can we glean from that? That those are interesting conversations to have, but I could imagine it resulting in a situation where with this modality, if someone maybe has activity in their brain that looks like they have ADHD, but they aren't presenting with any of the symptoms, what is the response there? Do they just like throw that case out, or do they treat this person as if they have ADHD, even though they're not presenting with the symptoms? Like it seems
Mhm.
like at the end of the day, the actual prescribed treatments are going to probably correlate more with like actual evidence, and this is just this weird tangential thing that I just can't really wrap my mind around.
Right. So then this is another ADD brain, apparently. Um, which is funny because they talk about overall decreased activity, especially in the prefrontal cortex and temporal lobes. Like, okay, sure, if I could just give a blanket statement of you have temporal lobe dysfunction, like if you just give a blanket statement like that, that doesn't tell me anything, because if you think of all the functions that the temporal lobe has, like what
Mhm.
symptoms are we talking about? Are we talking about auditory issues? Like, because that could be part of it. Like, where are you going with this?
Yeah, and never mind the fact that, like, brains are highly elastic, and especially when we were talking about people like, he claims to treat people who've had, like, brain injuries that they can't, like, demonstrate. Like, somebody who's had a certain kind of brain injury is probably going to have a very different functioning of their brain than somebody who hasn't had brain injuries. Brains vary. That's, just a thing that happens naturally, and sure, there's levels of consistency and things you can predict from brain activity, but, yeah, the not with the, degree of insight that I think he would like it to have.
So, on this website here, we have all of the conditions that he is
Mm,
claiming to be able to diagnose and treat, and of course, most of these are psychologically related, as expected. But then you have others on here that don't really fit, like Lyme disease and other infections. Why
mm.
is a psychiatrist trying to treat your Lyme disease? Also, why is your psychiatrist trying to treat your toxic mold exposure?
Yeah, yeah. Ugh.
Like, and I was looking into this. I looked up the symptoms of toxic mold exposure, and yeah, okay, you can get some brain fog with toxic mold exposure, but they just ignore the fact that, like, they will list one symptom and be like, yeah, this is a symptom of this toxicity, and then they'll ignore the other symptoms that you would also more likely see with that condition, so that you can just match yourself up with the pattern and be like, oh, well, I've had brain fog before, I must have toxic mold exposure. Like,
Yeah,
no, but you'd also see uh probably some, I think, nausea, some autonomic instability, some allergic symptoms. I think it's highly associated with like rhinitis and some more IgE type presentations, edema. It's like you can't latch onto a vague constitutional symptom and be able to diagnose just based on that. It's incredible.
yeah, it seems almost like they're doing like a Barnum statement of brain scans, like, uh, if you make a vaguely scientific, if you have any vaguely scientific information at hand, you can maybe kind of just fit yourself into the issue rather than derive the issue from examining like the evidence and the symptoms of that the person is presenting with.
Yeah, I kind of want to click on this and read out a little
Yeah,
bit.
let's go into it.
Uh, so, from memory loss to depression, there are a number of issues and symptoms associated with the mold and other toxic exposure, and they're listing all of these.
Wow,
So
psychological distress, just
yes, I
general
have
distress.
digestive issues, the general vague digestive issues. Which ones? I
Yeah,
would expect to see certain specific issues. with a specific mold. And which mold? Which type of mold?
Yeah.
I'm confused. Anyway, that's a bit off topic, but I thought this was
I don't
hilarious.
I don't think so. I think it goes more into what we were just talking about, that it's designed in such a way that no matter what negative human experience you're having, even things that might be just benign part of the human experience, like you could find yourself as someone who has one of these potential brain issues with the vagueness and that they present here.
So some of the other services that are offered kind of demonstrate the other woo that he's peddling. So we have the brain spect, which is his main thing that he's trying to sell. But we also, of course, some of these are very benign. Sure, psychiatric evaluations, telehealth. Okay, cool. Supplements and medication management, which is important because he sells supplements, and we will go into that. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which there is limited evidence. So there is some evidence that hyperbaric oxygen can promote like brain healing in Alzheimer's disease. There's not a lot known about how that mechanism works. There is an association with some benefits from hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I did a whole medical myths episode on hyperbaric oxygen therapy and the problems with it. But we know that this is a big one people latch on to. It is not approved for things like autism, which a lot of people, like there's been this whole trend of hyperbaric oxygen therapy for autism specifically. And it's disgusting.
Yeah. Trying to like cure it. That is a prevalent issue.
We have IV nutrient therapy. So if you pump yourself full of vitamins, you just won't be sad anymore.
Yep.
Hormone evaluation and replacement therapy. Why? Why is a psychiatrist doing this?
Yeah.
I'm guessing they're talking about like thyroid.
Yeah.
Like and estrogen for like menopause and because that you can get some mood symptoms with like and probably a huge one they're going with is low T, because a lot of people who produce testosterone produce low testosterone. And again, why is a psychiatrist doing this though? They shouldn't be. Do you think, I'm curious about his stance on trans people and hormone therapy?
I obviously
he could make some money. He
definitely could, and that would be a potential. Obviously, I don't know him. I don't know his stance, so anything that I say here is purely speculative. But he tends to view any aberration from normal, as vague as that is as well, as a fault of the brain. So I would suspect that he would have an issue with it, but I genuinely don't know. I mean, maybe that would be something that they would treat there. I doubt it. I'm skeptical, but I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
I'm scared that they're doing forensic psychiatry. That scares me.
Yeah, they try to cover literally every single imaginable base.
Yeah. So what do we do about this? If we're not supposed to use medications, which even in those case studies that he showed, he used the gold standard therapies, which were pharmaceuticals. I mean, Prozac is debatable if that is the gold standard now. I know a lot of his stuff was done in the past.
Yeah.
When we've updated our medications. Since then, like Prozac's not the like number one you go to anymore, but maybe when he saw that patient, maybe it was.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it seemed to me like a lot of his work came from like the 90s and the aughts, kind of early 2000s, a little bit in the 2010s, but less so. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? I haven't looked into the credentials of all of the people working there. I did see he has quite a robust team of people who seem to be credentialed, and like if people are getting Just saw
That
the
book. We're gonna
yeah,
get to the book.
yeah.
We'll get to the book.
If people are getting like talk therapy that is effective for them, I don't want to tell them not to keep going to their therapist, but it's the integration of things that are not evidence based and clearly out to just try to fish more money out of people that are really like I think the problem here, right? Like for example, the what you're on right now.
I mean, this is could I go to this guy, get a brain scan, and be like, yeah, well, my brain would be better on testosterone. Because it is. My brain is a lot better on testosterone. Which I don't understand how certain people's brains do well with estrogen. I don't get it.
Can
I
only
don't understand.
function. The mess I was had when I've been transferring to my new form of HRT, and it's been a little bit of a bumpy journey. I'm like only stabilizing in the past couple weeks, so yeah.
I'm glad you're starting to feel better though.
Yes. Better.
So he's selling supplements, of course, because why wouldn't he?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't he sell supplements? And it's funny because this is vague and it stays pretty vague. But in the daily essentials, he talks about essential brain health supplements that our bodies need to help and optimize your health and life. What does this mean?
Got me.
And then for focus and attention, the best clean energy supplements made of vitamins and minerals for a sharp and clear mind. Again, what does this mean? And of course, the first thing that comes up is MCT oil.
Yeah, I think it's also one thing that I find interesting about this is like, there would almost be like you could almost pretend to be legitimate if you were like exclusively giving this stuff to people who have like severe issues with focus and attention, like people who have like clinical like ADHD or ADD diagnoses. But with a lot of this stuff, I'm almost willing to bet literally anyone would want to improve their focus and attention. And if you said, "Hey,
Mhm.
we have this thing that helps you improve your focus and attention," like who's not going to want to be like, "Yeah, I would love to be more focused and attentive in my life." I'm sure that would improve everyone's life significantly if you could just do that magically.
Yeah. And a lot of these, so certain supplements have been shown to like improve symptoms, especially mood related symptoms, which there's a lot of questions that I have about what confounding variables would also be present, such as like
Mm,
the placebo effect,
yeah,
for example.
yeah,
But there are some studies that show, sure, taking GABA could help you with some symptoms. And I think most of the studies that I read were saying that you could use it in conjunction with other therapies and you might get a little boost, but nothing that shows that by itself it does significantly better than a pharmaceutical.
yeah, yeah.
And so I pulled this up to see what's in it. So the benefits: it promotes concentration and attention. How? Stress support supports a healthy response to everyday stress. How? and enhances energy levels without caffeine. So I'd like to know how it does this.
Yeah, same.
So if you're looking for a smarter pick-me-up, Focus and Energy naturally supports your body's energy level with caffeine-free green tea, choline, and the special adaptogens rhodiola, ashwagandha, and ginseng. And unlike the energy blast some of us get from our go-to daily stimulants, I've got one right here. There's no mood-thudding crash. We call it clean energy. So Dr. Almond's advanced formula contains an exclusive combination of energizing herbs and adaptogens. Adaptogens are a class of herbs that help our bodies adapt to the environmental, physical, and emotional stressors to help us protect against the draining effects of stress. These specially selected nutrients work through multiple mechanisms to support enhanced mental focus and sustained energy all day long. Plus, Focus and Energy is safe, natural, and non-habit forming, the perfect natural way to feel energized, productive, and alert. Did he mention it was natural?
No, I don't think so. That would be great.
No.
I think he should add that though. I think that could help with his product placement, a little bit better.
Hey, Arden
I
is vegan.
Oh yes. Oh
You should
sweet.
buy
Good.
it.
I can take it. I have questions about adaptogens. This is the first
Mhm.
time I've heard the word adaptogen, and it sounds like a magic herb that does everything. Wait, can we read that again? It says class of herbs that help our bodies adapt to the environmental, physical, and emotional
Mhm.
stressors and help protect against the draining effects of stress. So it does help.
Everything.
It does all the things. It helps you with if it's bad, you take this is basically what I've gotten from this.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we have green tea extract, we have ginseng, ashwagandha, rhodiola, and choline. And it's funny because he's saying in the description that, like, oh, we don't use stimulants. Guess what this is? This is stimulants.
Right. I have I mean, and this feels like just kind of like I think something that people are probably tired of hearing. I don't know if you've done a show on this in the past, but like when it comes to like vitamin supplements and like naturopathy, like they will often use these things that like for sure some of them might have some sort of like actual measurable effect. A lot of them are just kind of like there is some sort of chemical compound in there that is associated with like mood. So therefore giving you an herb with that chemical must boost your mood. And that's where like a lot of those issues are.
Yeah, and something with this and other neurologic supplements, like people that want to give amino acid therapies, which it sounds great. It sounds great that I could give somebody tryptophan and improve their serotonin levels, or I could give you tyrosine and improve your dopamine levels. Sure. It sounds like common sense. It sounds like if I give you the building blocks, then you will make more of this compound. But if you don't understand the mechanism of neurotransmitter synthesis, it doesn't really line up because so the drugs that we use, and he says that the problem with the drugs that we use is that we focus on keeping the neurotransmitters around in your body longer, or you modulate the receptors in some way, which is kind of what you need to do. Because if you're just going to give the amino acids, it has to go through the whole synthesis process. And in that, you have rate limiting enzymes that are going to function at a certain rate, and you have feedback mechanisms. So no matter how much of a certain amino acid you give somebody, you're not producing an infinite amount of neurotransmitter. You're still limited by your body's process and how it synthesizes it, and you're limited by the feedback from when you've produced enough, turning off the pathway, and you're just going to waste the rest of it. So you have to bypass that process, because if someone's system is not producing a certain amount and their body is accustomed to that amount, they might be downregulating. And so you have to bypass the mechanism and force the transmitters to stay around longer, or you have to force the receptors to work differently. And then also taking into account crossing of the blood-brain barrier. Certain compounds are going to more readily cross, and the medications we use have evidence that they do cross in a way that we want them to. Tyrosine and tryptophan do cross because you synthesize serotonin in the brain, but not as much. Tryptophan will cross the blood-brain barrier as our other conventional medications do. So, I don't know. That was a lot on physiology.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all of that stuff is really interesting and relevant. And I'm just trying to. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted. I was trying to research if any of these are like FDA approved,
Oh,
certified, or
I should definitely show at the bottom. There's a very helpful. Oh, maybe it's not here. There's a very helpful statement somewhere on the website that says we are in no way trying to treat any medical conditions or
Right,
give
of
a
course.
diagnosis. Like, of course you're going to say that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you don't want accountability.
And I'm
You
also
know.
I got also I'm sorry, I also saw that there were reviews. I didn't get to reading any of them, but I noticed they were, like, all 5-star, and I was like, "Hmm, that seems
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
suspicious." I kinda wanna read into that a little more too later. Maybe worth telling the viewers, if you wanna go read those, you probably could have a good laugh.
yeah. And this is $40.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, like, the most offensive thing, right? That, like, they do all of this legwork to try to make this seem reasonable, to include chemicals or research that maybe almost could, like, bypass even somebody who's a little bit informed into buying like, thinking this is legit. But then they'll, like, charge insane amounts for it, or, like, the brain and body powder max, is $140. And how many, it's a 30-day supply.
Mhm.
You're spending just $140 a month on this
Yeah.
supplement that is they will tell you straight up is not intended to treat anything. So what is the point then? What, like, really?
So we also have he's selling GABA. He's selling curcumin, which has no evidence behind it. Happy Saffron Plus. You can pay $50 for saffron supplements. Everybody. Pro Brain Biotics. Cool. Oh, and we can get to the vitamin D in a sec because I'm gonna rant. I'm gonna rant my ass off there.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's Calm My Brain, which is $45. And I love how they don't say anxiety because anxiety is a diagnosis. They say anxiousness. I
Yeah.
think they're trying to avoid the liability of saying anxiety.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, there's I mean, that's the entirety of this guy, and his brand seems to be skirting as close to the possible line of, like, objectionable medical claims as possible without crossing it.
And he's marketing this for children.
Yeah.
Ashwagandha, do not give your children ashwagandha. Please don't do it. So this has ashwagandha, magnesium, and L-theanine, which I don't know much about. Mag is not something I want to play with, especially considering like cardiac arrhythmias. And sure, 100 milligrams probably isn't going to cause an arrhythmia, but just like we don't need to be in this mindset of thinking that it's good to just take magnesium for funsies. It's not benign. None of these things are benign. Um, I want to talk about the vitamin D. Let's
Yeah, get into it.
talk about vitamin D because I face palmed here really hard. I laughed super hard at this. So vitamin D3, 5,000. So 5,000 units of vitamin D3. This is not safe. This is not at all safe. Like if you do this, see, I don't know how you feel about your kidneys, but like your kidneys are working
I like
so
it.
hard every day for you. Like they are filtering your blood and making like your pee like safe. And do you hate your kidneys this much? Why are you going to abuse your kidneys with 5,000 units of vitamin D3? This is something we call kidney stones waiting to happen. Don't do this. Please don't do this.
I wonder if there's any reports of anything like that coming up
Oh,
following
I'm sure.
the I mean, there's 157 reviews, so I have to assume a significant amount more than 157 bought it if 157 were willing to review it. So, yeah, I'm curious if there are any reports of anything that's happened subsequent to buying these, and I would wonder how we could find that information if it did exist. Um,
So you're spending $25, and there are a couple things that could happen when you take this much vitamin D. So number one is you make very expensive urine because it's $25 of urine because you're going to absorb some of this vitamin D, but you're not going to absorb all of it. And the stuff that you do absorb, you have to convert to active vitamin D. in your kidneys. So that's another thing. The more vitamin D you have, the more work it's on your kidneys to activate the vitamin D. So just to be nice to your kidneys, but you have to activate it. And you're going to pee out all the rest that is not used. And then if you end up taking in too much, then you're just going to probably give yourself kidney stones, and it's not great. Don't do this.
And I mean, isn't that an issue with, from my understanding, this is more like a medical thing than a psych thing. So I'm definitely treading on ground that I'm not as familiar with. But isn't that the case for vitamin supplements, generally speaking, that you end up expelling the majority of supplements through waste and not actually absorbing it into your body?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sure, you could get if you have an actual deficiency, this might help you. I mean, not this amount. Do not this high of a dosage. Please do something lower. But if you have a actual deficiency, you could take some supplements and get better. But most people are not deficient. I mean, vitamin D is something a lot of people are technically deficient in, but you don't just supplement because of a number on a lab result. You go based on symptoms and risk factors. Like, sure, if someone has high risk of osteoporosis, yeah, okay, I'm going to treat their number if their vitamin D is low. But take a young person, they're eating the right foods, they're going outside. Like, if their vitamin D is a little bit low and they're not having any negative effects from it, then why would I give them a supplement just to make their number better? That's not responsible medicine. It's lazy.
Yeah.
There's my rant on vitamin D for everybody. I just wanted to get that out there. Also, aging success. I should just stop. I should stop.
Yeah, no, I think it's important though, especially the fact that there are like maybe actual like relevant medical risks that could come from something like this. You know, like it's one thing to take like a pill that's going to ultimately just not do anything, you're going to pee it all out, but like if there are actual potential medical risks, that's very serious. So I think it's super relevant.
He also has books.
Yes, and classes.
And classes. So he writes children's books too. Look at this. He has a children's book, and I'm really curious about what this is.
And Tale of Super Questions.
Okay, so this is like related to therapy. Okay. I showed you the one that that was really funny. I gotta find it again. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So as a man, granted I am a trans man, but as a man, I'm gonna shut up and let Arden talk about this.
I mean, I don't have a lot to say on this. Like, unleash the power of the female brain, like master questionnaires. Honestly, I am kind of curious. I almost not enough to spend $50 to investigate, but I am almost curious enough to spend $50 to investigate. Like, what questionnaires could Dr. Aman, who has demonstrated himself to not care that much about like actual facts or truth or evidence, have to say about the female brain? I'm skeptical about anyone who's going to sex the brain in that way. Like, well, sure, kind of like there can be brain activity that's relevant to people with ADHD or PTSD or brain damage or things that can be interesting in research. There can be like differences between, on average, like people of different groups. And like one of those can be like people assigned female at birth or something. But I just don't understand the point of this. It just, I don't know. It feels like trying to prey on like another level of somebody who's looking for help, uh, and somebody who might think that, you know, a supplement of like vitamin D is too like medicinal, and maybe just reading a pink book is gonna make them feel better.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a lot to say on this. Just I think this just goes to show that like really what this business is not something that cares about treating people or making people better or helping them live with psychological states that are causing them in distress and like impairing their ability to function. uh this man just cares about being notorious and rich. That's all this is. um
And I want to address Brainbug's comment. Some people might benefit from that high of vitamin D, but if you are one of those people that requires that much vitamin D, you need a doctor to monitor that. Like that should be prescribed, and that should because you have other issues of why you would need that high of a dosage. So, and that's with anything. Like if you have a responsible medical professional who is handling this kind of stuff, like I'm not opposed to supplements if you are being monitored appropriately, but like he's basically advocating for people to just get this on their own, like just buy it from his store and do it, which is not responsible at all.
Yeah, definitely not. I don't think either of us want to. Like, I know my mom takes weekly injections of vitamin B that she was prescribed by her doctor to take due to a deficiency. Like that is a serious thing for sure. Vitamin supplements can be really helpful for some people in certain contexts, but definitely, I think especially the pill supplement is like another thing that's an issue with like first pass effect. I imagine is probably relevant there, of like when it's getting filtered through your body and your kidneys, like how much of that are you actually getting into your body that's relevant in a medical sense. Yeah.
All right, so we can kind of debrief a little bit. So what are the takeaways from today?
I think this man maybe at one point in his career had an authentic interest in brains and research and psychology and all those things. And I think he has since turned into someone who's kind of the equivalent of like what would have been an influencer before influencers were a thing. Like this guy's been on like Dr. Phil and like a bunch of talk shows talking to people about his bogus brain scans. I just wish people cared about like evidence-based treatment. Like one thing that also gets me so hard is like they talk a lot about like wanting to like get away from medication and stuff, right? Like it, you can have like really powerful evidence-based treatment that is not taking a pill. Like uh and there are some modalities that are evidence-based that are like probably going to be more appealing to people who like are looking for like the spiritual side of things. Like for example, acceptance and commitment therapy is an evidence-based treatment that some people interpret some of the things that you would do in acceptance commitment therapy as like spiritual practice. Like there's a lot of focus on meditation and mindfulness and that sort of thing, right? That I think can satisfy that urge to people of like, oh, I'm like doing this like natural kind of treatment for my brain, but it's evidence-based. It's actually going to help you with your symptoms. It's actually going to not it might not for you specifically, but it's an evidence-based treatment that it can work for people. It actually has like predictive power, these treatments and how they impact people's symptoms. Uh, Getting your brain scan is a waste of money, and it's just an extra step to make you think that he's doing some extra magical treatment that the other doctors aren't going to do, and it's just not the case.
But Arden, I want my brain scanned. I want the cool pictures.
I mean, that's it, right? Like it's cool to have your brain scans. Like who doesn't want to have like a look inside their brain? That is such a cool concept. I mean, it's the same reason that like when Matt got his heart surgery, he got a picture of like the inside of his heart because it's fucking cool to be who gets to see inside their body. Not many people. I think that's a really interesting thing. But is it worth $3,000 if it's not going to give you actually any benefit? Probably not.
So should I do this? Will this cure my anxiety?
No, it will not cure your anxiety.
Arn, I thought we were going to be convinced today. I thought that we were going to have our worldviews radically changed because of this guy's website.
Well, my I was not convinced. I will say it's worth, if you want a good laugh, you should watch some of the animated videos that they have on their channel on YouTube, the like little drawings. They're
They're
really
funny.
funny.
They're
They're really
fun.
funny, and they're full of even more woo than we saw here. Like everything we covered here was very like an attempt to frame what they're presenting in like a scientific way, even if they still kind of failed. Um, when you watch the videos, he will talk about some stuff that is very, very much akin to me to like energy. Like when we hear that used in pseudoscience a lot, he'll talk about brain reserve and how like everything you do affects your brain reserve. Like if you fell down the stairs as a kid, you've lost brain reserve. If your mom was stressed while she was pregnant with you, you have less brain reserve. And he made this outlandish claim that two soldiers could be struck by like it was an explosion of some sort, the exact same angle and blast radius, and one of them would be disfigured and disabled due to it because he had less brain reserve, and the person who had
What?
more would walk away basically fine, which is fucking
What?
absurd. Like, oh, because my mom didn't smoke with me when she was pregnant, I could survive an explosion. Like that's that's a fucking wild claim, dude.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
yeah, and then there's a computer with a dick on it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really funny.
Maybe we'll have to go back and do a part 2 where we watch his videos.
Yeah,
But
they're super super funny. They're so honestly, I don't know if anyone in the audience knows spirit science. The
oh
whole time I was
god,
watching
yeah.
those videos, I felt like I was watching a spirit science video.
I need to do one about spirit science because he has some medical claims on there. I forgot about him.
Oh yeah, I
I
used to watch it when
forgot
I was a
about spirit
teenager. I bought into that shit when I was a little. I was like, I don't believe in like God anymore, but like I still believe in something. That was where I went, you know.
Yeah, I had a debunk channel a long time in the past with a friend of mine who it's funny because like we both were pre-transition at the time and
Uh-huh.
now we both transitioned in opposite directions.
Ah, that's
so,
funny.
so it's hilarious. But yeah, we did some debunks of that. Maybe I'll have to do that at some point. But once again, for the people in the audience, where can they find you? What are you on next?
I think the next show I'm gonna be on will be next Thursday's Transatlantic. So you can go to The Line here on YouTube. There are a bunch of different shows on there, but every Thursday is my show with Katie Montgomery, where we talk about any and every question relating to trans issues. And I would say follow me on Twitter. That's probably the place I post the most and where you can get access to some other shit. Um, so yeah, I would say go there. That is but that's where I'd send people. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have some of the links in the description. The other site, I do not have a link for obvious reasons.
That's
But
fair.
you can go to the Twitter and you can follow from there.
You'll figure
That's
it
not
out.
hard to
You're
find.
smart people. You know how to click more than one link at a time.
So some things going on this channel. It's a busy week. I'm going to be on Talk Heathen tomorrow. Also going to be on the Sunday show tomorrow. And then I think on Tuesday, I'm doing something with Oz on Tang. And then what else do I got going this next week? Trivia nights on Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then medical myths again next week. Still trying to confirm what the topic is going to be next week. But it'll be a fun one. Also, we have a Discord. We have a Facebook group now because I know some people like Facebook. So I have a Facebook group now if you want updates. Also, as always, we got to thank the patrons, Reggie,
Ooh.
Kevin, and Beck. Thank you for supporting the channel. And just to show the Patreon a little bit, there is an after show after this on the Patreon. So if you want to hang out there, you can join the Patreon and then you get access to that. And here's I don't have the Facebook link up here just yet, but here's all the other links. And thank you everybody for joining in. It was a great time. Stay curious, and I will see you all in the next one.